Shall we move on?
Yeah.
So Ganja and Hess is an experimental horror film from 77, I want to say.
I will look it up for you.
Which going into it, all I knew was black vampires. That was basically that was the joke. I think it was you or Kirby. It was like, it's about black vampires. And it's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's not even a log line.
That's very reductive.
Very reductive. But so Ganja and Hess is about a professor played by Dwayne Jones, who is the guy in Night of the Living Dead.
He was also in Losing Ground.
Oh, and also in Losing Ground, which I haven't watched yet, but I will. And he brings on an assistant played by Bill Gunn, who is also the director and who is in one of your other movies.
He was also in Losing Ground. You've got to watch Losing Ground. I think you'll like it. But.
It's high on the list. And so he brings on this assistant, and the setup is that they go to the professor's. It's like
I'm laughing because a cat is murdering. I just don't want people to think I'm like laughing at your description, but there's a cat murdering a toy next to me, so it's making me smile. Excellent. But you were doing a good job.
Thank you. So they go to the professor's house, which is like big and ornate, and like he's a professor of anthropology. He's black, so is his assistant, and he's talking about this civilization, which I actually forgot to look up if it was real or not. It feels fake.
Yeah, it feels like something out of a Lovecraft story.
Yeah, and so the assistant is a little unhinged, and we figure that out, and then the assistant stabs the professor with an old ceremonial dagger, and that dagger turns the professor into a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the record, I want to get this out of the way at the top. I did not understand that was what happened. It is definitely made, like they had some elbow grease, some shoestring, like a roll of tape, a couple pieces of wood, and like that was it. That's what they used to put this movie together. Like it looks like it is so low budget. And so I get it that they probably just didn't have enough film to even shoot an insert shot of the dagger going into him.
Right.
Which would have been like the clue, like, oh, this dagger is special, or like done something to make it a little more obvious. It didn't have to be that much more obvious, and maybe I was just being adult in that moment. But like, I didn't get that was what was happening. After, when I looked it up, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Also, there is some narration at the beginning that sort of clues you into this from.
But it also kind of made it more confusing because there's an opening text. So you think that has happened, and actually what the text is describing is what you're about to see. And it makes it, so you've already got these like names, and so you're like, wait, is that guy? Like, it gets a little, it starts off confusing, for sure.
Right, and it's definitely, it requires some research.
Okay, so it's 1973, and I'm going to come out between the two of us and say I like low budget filmmaking more than you do.
Yes.
You are really drawn to beautiful films, and I distrust them a little bit. Meanwhile, I love just seeing people's hearts on their sleeves as they do what they can with what they have to make it work.
Yeah.
And for the record, I don't think there is anything wrong with having a budget and using it to make the best possible film you have and having it be competent and wonderful. There's no loss of nobility there. And making a film is very hard, no matter how much money you have. But I just have a soft spot in my heart for like seeing the creativity that comes from not having the time and the money, which is different from, again, having time and money is also allows you to be creative, but it's a different kind of creative. Like for some reason I'm thinking of The Lighthouse, and who knows how much I don't know what budget David Eggers had for that, or Robert Eggers had for that, but
I'm gonna look it up. Keep going.
But it's like he went and found all the period appropriate, like
Robert Eggers. Although I think Yeah, I'm not sure if that's how you say his last name, but anyways, keep going.
You know, he like found all the silverware of the time, and like he located all these props and so on.
Yeah.
But something like Ganja and Hess, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if the actors used clothing from their own wardrobes. Like no one.
And somebody had access to that house, and somebody had access.
That's someone's house. Yeah. And that kind of where you're really just like, how can we use what we have? And it does lead to like.
Well, so my line. So spoilers. Reminder: we do these things with spoilers. I have two. My one line for this that I've used twice now, I think, in different capacities, is like in the scene where our man stabs. Our assistant stabs the professor with the dagger. He gets up on the bed and he's emoting and then in the background, a crew member is washing their hands in the sink in the bathroom. All you can see is their hands, but you can see their hands. This is distracting, and that is totally fine. Again, it is a low-budget film, shoestrings and elbow grease. But that also serves to remind me, like, this is a really competently made film, like, considering how they only had elbow grease and shoestring. And the story's kind of interesting, and the themes are really interesting. I didn't even like it that much right after I watched it, but once I started to think of a different film called To Sleep with Anger, which I really like, and how it's actually kind of tackling similar themes or related themes, that, like, I kind of understood what Ganja and Hess was doing. And I was like, oh, that's really neat what it was doing. Yes, the filmmaking is a little funky in places, and you can see that crew member washing their hands, but they managed to get it done.
That's like the only moment of that, for the record.
Yeah, that I noticed. There's a few other awkward shots where, like, there's that scene where there's some shots in, like, the when our professor goes to have sex with a hooker, I guess, a sex worker, or somebody. I don't exactly understand what that scene was, where you just couldn't see what was happening. And I was like, oh, they only had a little bit of film and they just got the best shots they could. And they didn't worry about continuity. And so it's like, well, I don't really know where anyone is in that scene. But it's
I'm just saying, I recently watched, I didn't make it through the whole thing. I just wasn't in the right place for it. But I was watching, I think it was Exterminating Angel, the Louis Buñuel film. And a boom mic just whoop, up in, like, right up here. And now, he's a surrealist. And I've even heard people say they think maybe the aspect ratio it's being shown in wasn't the one he meant for it to be. But I mean, that's, you know.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where it's like, I can't not notice these things, but it also serves to remind me, like, they did a lot with just not having much. Like, Bill Gunn, the director and writer, really was trying to explore something complicated about, like, how I finally figured it out, how organized religion kind of erases Black traditions, how much Christianity being pushed on or forced on, or even willfully forced on in some cases, but how that's a really complicated issue, how Christianity sort of erases all these Black traditions that come from Africa and whatever. And so it's like, that's a really complex thing to tackle. And he does it with a kind of interesting nuance, you know, so I was impressed by the end of it.
Yeah, I struggled to really, it's one of those movies I want to rewatch. What I think is kind of interesting about it that we haven't mentioned, and maybe this ties into how I like low budget things. It was like a series of scenes, and I really liked the writing for the scenes, mixed in with, like, just imagery and kind of montage and I guess montage is the word I want to use, where it's things edited together that to kind of create a meaning, but it wasn't like a scene. It wasn't two characters talking about
right
something.
And it is billed as being experimental because it has a narrative and a story, but it's cut into three parts with subheaders, and it's not. I almost wonder if partially it's called experimental just because of how kind of funky it is in places.
Non-narrative. It's a little hollow. But there's definitely, like, a through line. But yeah, I found the scenes really interesting, but I definitely did have trouble following some.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that. I actually you know,
I had trouble with
I
that.
like there being a little work involved in understanding a film. I personally enjoy that most of the time.
Yeah, I enjoy that too, and like anything, it depends on the mood. But
Right.
I think I had trouble following it, and there was sections towards the end. There's a really long scene where our professor goes to church and is essentially getting the vampire prayed away, um, uh, and it's like that scene was really long, and I got kind of bored. But like again, after I watched it and I started thinking of it in relation to Sleep with Anger, I kind of came away with like, oh, it kind of means something more to me now. Like it's held together by theme. Like it's what these, that's often what experimental film or like non-linear, non-narrative film is held together with, is theme or character maybe. But
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is like there's some scenes I really like. I really like the one where the assistant is in the tree and
yeah,
the doctor's talking up to him, and you kind of see half of each of them.
yeah,
Um, there's some scenes when Ganja does show up, who is the
yes,
assistant's widow, although she doesn't realize it.
at least not right away.
But there's also great imagery. There's like really, and I think there may be a better copy of it somewhere.
There is
I'd
a
like to,
restored Kino Lorber copy or something, which I'm almost tempted to buy, but I'm not sure. Maybe you'll buy it so I don't have to.
yeah, because there's just really interesting imagery of like blood and
Well, I
I
love the
appreciate,
score too.
yeah, I appreciated that because something that like Cane River, I really like Cane River, but it definitely suffered from the interiors were a little lacking. Like there wasn't a lot of set design to it. It was
Yeah.
mostly shot outside, so that didn't matter. And
Mhm.
the editing, apparently I read somewhere, it was the editor's first job. And even they are like, oh yeah, those shots are too long. And that would cause the actors to kind of hang there a little bit.
Yeah.
And there was some awkward dialogue. So when you have an actor doing their best with a little bit of awkward dialogue, well, the shot just kind of holds on it and you
Yeah.
doesn't move fast enough past it. This didn't have that kind of stuff. Like the interiors looked really interesting. The
Yeah.
editing of those like montages and the imagery was all really good.
Yeah, I'd be curious how it looks. The copy we watched was really, it was in the night scenes and the darker scenes. It was just legitimately hard to see certain parts of the frame. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious if we got a better version, would it look more bare and more boring, or would it get filled in with some of the stuff that you can kind of see
Yeah.
and looks interesting, but it's kind of hard to tell. Like I'd be curious what a cleaned up
Yeah.
version would look like. At least I assume there's a cleaned up version somewhere.
And for the record,
Yeah.
I like Cane River a lot too. It's interesting to see that they're both low budget, and it's kind of interesting to see what both their strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Ganja Hess was really good. I think what it really needs from me is a rewatch to kind of.
Yeah, well, the score, I specifically want to talk about the score because I liked it and I didn't find a place for it in my Instagram post. But like so the guy who plays the Reverend is also the man who did the score, named Sam Wayman. Sam Wayman or Wayman? Wayman, I think. You can look it up, I guess.
He liked your Instagram post.
He liked my Instagram post, so I should remember his name. But I really liked the song. There's actually a line in the song where it's like this old something, they became addicted to blood. It could only be gone away in the sign of the cross, but yet Christianity had not yet come, so there were no crosses. And like when I speak that out loud, it sounds absurd and goofy and like it belongs in a bad good movie. But when it's sung, it really works. And when you watch the movie, it works. And because that's a commentary on, I think, Black traditions being sort of taken over by, or Black spiritual traditions, probably more specifically, being taken over by Christianity and in modern America and other situations, like that's kind of an interesting lyric, and it was a really interesting song. So I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't notice it the way you did, so I have to pay attention again. It was Sam Wayman.
Wayman.
I think I noticed at the time that I was enjoying the score, but I don't remember specifics about it. So
yeah, it's unfortunately one of those, not surprisingly, it's not on Amazon Unlimited, which is the music service I'm subscribed to. I think there's like a vinyl of it, but like it's expensive and I couldn't find like just a regular version of it. And I'm like, I could buy a vinyl and then go play it at my friend's house, I guess. But
well, what you do in that case is it doesn't work. I was thinking you buy the movie and then you just play it in the background, but then you hear all the dialogue.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well.
That works for Dawson City, which doesn't have any dialogue.
Well, yes, that's a unique case.
Yeah, no,
yeah. Anyways, it's a good movie. We recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like I've said it 10 times already, but like I feel like when I watch it again, I'll have more to say about it because
we can talk about it again. We can do another thing about it.
It's also interesting. I talked about it in my post on loving. Sometimes when I watch something, I try not to have expectations, but I am a human being. So sometimes it'll take 2 watches to kind of understand that, to realize the things I thought were going to happen aren't going to happen. So what is it that I'm seeing, or to stop anticipating, or so on, and get into it. So.
Yeah, no, I get that. And this is a movie, I don't actually rewatch movies that often, but this is one I'd pretty happily rewatch.
Yeah.